Welcome my YouTube channel, Asterix, ladies and gentlemen. Asterix. There comes a moment in every man's life where he falls to his knees, not because he's weak, but because life has finally whispered a secret loud enough to pierce his soul. That secret is pain. Not the kind that bruises the body, but the one that twists deep in the spirit. It's the ache of loss, the sting of betrayal, the silence of abandonment, the weight of purposelessness. And yet, pain is not a curse. It is the divine whisper of your becoming. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That is not a metaphor. That is spiritual law. Okay. The pain you try to numb is the very wound that leads to your awakening. Nice. You cannot grow unless a part of you dies. Nice. That's the great paradox. What you resist in pain persists in your life. The Stoics, the silent warriors of ancient philosophy, understood this deeply. Epictetus, a slave-turned philosopher, endured lifelong hardship, and yet, he said, difficulties show men what they are. Why? Because pain doesn't just reveal, it refines. What fire is to gold, pain is to the soul. When you feel the burn of rejection, that is not life being cruel. That is the universe breaking your false self. You were never meant to cling to external validation. Get that pain. It's the invitation to return to yourself. Pain is never random. It is precise. And according to Jung, it's often rooted in your shadow, those parts of you that you were taught to disown. Your anger, your neediness, your fear, your arrogance. They all live in the unconscious, suppressed, but not silent. Pain arises when the unconscious demands to be seen. When you feel jealous, it's not about the other person. It's about a desire within you that you've buried. The Stoics didn't flinch at pain because they didn't personalize it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, said, "If it is endurable, then endure it. If it is not, then stop complaining." He didn't mean to ignore your emotions. He meant honor your pain, but do not build an identity around it. Use it. Let it forge you. Now consider this. Every heartbreak you felt, every anxiety attack, every failure, every sleepless night, what if none of it was a mistake? What if every single moment of pain was actually grace in disguise? Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Pain is the thread that reveals the hidden unconscious. It shows you where you're still asleep. It shows you where you're fragmented. It shows you where you're pretending. And once you become conscious of the pattern breaks. That is the beginning of spiritual authority. Powerful men are not those who avoid pain. Powerful men are those who metabolize pain into discipline, into clarity, into compassion. That is why Stoic habits are not just intellectual. They are sacred. To wake up early, to resist emotional reactivity, to say no to your cravings, to journal your thoughts, to sit in silence. All of these are small ways to say, I honor my pain enough to make meaning out of it. There is spiritual meaning in every ache you've endured. The woman who left you, she didn't break you. She revealed the part of you still dependent on others for your worth. The friend who betrayed you, he didn't destroy your faith in people. He sharpened your discernment. The failure that crushed your dream, it didn't end your journey. Revealed that your identity was attached to the outcome, not the process. Every pain you carry holds the seed of a new identity. Okay. The Stoics trained for pain by visualizing it. Okay. Premeditatio malorum. The premeditation of evils. They rehearsed loss, death, failure, loneliness. Why? Because when you stop fearing pain, you start living with purpose. Jung would agree. You don't heal by escaping the darkness. You heal by entering it. Eyes wide open, with courage. Let me ask you something. Where do you hurt the most right now? Is it loneliness? Is it regret? Is it confusion that pain is not? Asking you to escape. It is asking you to listen. What is the lesson? What habit must change? What truth must be faced? What false belief must die? Because here's the highest truth. You were never meant to be painless. You were meant to be powerful. And power is born through fire. When you become the kind of man who sees meaning in the very things others try to numb, you become untouchable. Not because life stops hurting, but because you stop needing it to be easy. Jung would call that integration. The Stoics would call it virtue. I call it awakening. So the next time life wounds you, don't flinch, don't run, don't complain. Breathe, observe, learn, then rise, because every pain is proof that your soul is alive. Your story is not finished. You are not. Broken, you are becoming. And every moment of pain is sacred. Asterisk. Everything in your world is yourself pushed out. And pain, though often feared and resisted, is no exception to this truth. Pain is not a misfortune. It is not a divine mistake, nor is it some random affliction imposed upon you by external forces. It is, in its essence, a message, a coded signal, a precise vibration sent forth from the depths of your own consciousness, demanding to be heard, asking to be understood, and ultimately inviting you to rise to a new dimension of awareness. What you interpret as suffering is, in fact, the movement of life pressing against the shell of your outdated self-concept. It is a divine alarm clock, ringing to awaken the God within you. The outer man sees pain as something separate from himself. He believes the world is acting upon him. He believes he is at the mercy of circumstance, at the whim of other people's actions, or perhaps the cruelty of fate. But the awakened man, the inner man, knows otherwise. He knows that every circumstance is rooted in an imaginal act. Every illness, every betrayal, every sudden loss has its seed in consciousness, not as punishment, but as reflection. When you are unwilling to evolve through insight, you will evolve through tension. Pain is the evidence that your deeper self is ready to grow, but your current beliefs, habits, attitude resist that expansion. What the world calls pain, the soul calls progress. If you would sit in stillness and listen to the sensation rather than flee it, if you would observe rather than react, you would discover that every ache has a voice. That voice is not cruel, nor does it condemn. It simply says, you are living below your design. You are entertaining thoughts unworthy of the divine image within. And so the discomfort intensifies not as vengeance, but as a sharpening force, designed to carve away the illusions that keep you small. What you call a heartbreak may be the echo of your own need for self-recognition. What you call failure may be the collapse of a structure you built on borrowed ideals. When you experience emotional or physical discomfort, your first instinct is often to run. You distract yourself. You numb yourself. You blame others. But the moment you stop and listen, the moment you lean into the pain instead of escaping it, something extraordinary begins to happen. You begin to decode the symbol. You begin to remember that all things are states of consciousness, and pain is simply a state signaling transition. The acorn cannot become the oak unless it first breaks. The seed must surrender its current form in order to embody its higher one. So it is with you. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that something is going wrong. It is a sign that something new is trying to be born through you. But if you insist on interpreting every disruption as a tragedy, you miss the call to ascend. The outer world is but a mirror, a faithful servant reflecting the substance of your beliefs. And when your beliefs are too narrow, too fear-based, too rooted in an identity of lack, the mirror becomes painful to behold. Yet this pain is the sacred friction between what you are and what you are becoming. Without that friction, you would remain asleep, living a life smaller than what your soul intends. If you would take time each day to observe your discomfort, not judge it, not label it, but simply observe, you would begin to understand the exact message it carries. cues. Is your body tired? Perhaps you are living under the strain of pleasing others rather than honoring yourself. Are you anxious? Perhaps your mind is addicted to images of the future while ignoring the infinite supply of the present. Are you angry? Then maybe you are witnessing your own power projected onto another and denied within yourself. In each case, pain is a pointer, guiding you not outward, but inward, where all transformation begins. There is no punishment in life, only reflection, only correspondence. What is not acknowledged in thought must be experienced in form. And so, pain comes not to harm you, but to clarify your awareness. It isolates the areas of your life where you have not yet claimed authorship. And it does not leave until its mission is fulfilled, like a persistent messenger knocking at the door. It will revisit you in new disguises, new situations, new symptoms, till you finally say, "Speak, I am listening." And now we must turn to the most avoided and yet most liberating. Truth. The pain you feel is often the voice of your own shadow. That part of you that you were taught to suppress, trained to ignore, forced to deny in order to be accepted by others. But what is denied does not die, it only hides. And eventually, it emerges. Not as insight, but as irritation. Not as clarity, but as crisis. Until you embrace it, the shadow is not evil. It is simply unknown. It is the disowned self, the unloved self, the self you buried under years of social conditioning and moral expectations. And pain, again, is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It brings the hidden into the visible. It shines a light on what has long been ignored. Asterisk. So when you are triggered by someone's words, when you are cut by someone's absence, when you are disturbed by someone's behavior, ask not what they are doing to you, but what part of yourself you are being shown. You will find that the world is not doing anything to you, it is revealing you. When someone disrespects you, they may be showing you the part of you that believes you are not worthy of respect. When you are left behind, it may be the echo of your own abandonment of self. When you are judged, it may be the mirror reflecting your own harsh inner dialogue. In every case, the pain is a revealer of beliefs that no longer belong. To the new you that is forming. To integrate your shadow is to welcome pain as a sacred guest. To allow it to sit at the table without resistance. To say, I see you. I feel you. What do you need me to understand? In that moment, what was once darkness becomes light. What was once agony becomes liberation. For there is nothing more painful than pretending to be someone you are not. And nothing more healing than reclaiming every part of yourself, especially the parts you were told were unworthy of love. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who you already are beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, beneath the self-denial. Pain simply peels back the layers, like a sculptor revealing the form hidden within the marble. You are not here to avoid discomfort. You are here to transcend it. And you transcend it not by fighting it, but by understanding it. And you understand it by accepting it as your own creation, your own messenger, your own divine guide back to self-awareness. When you live from this knowing, life changes. The same events occur, but you no longer react or respond. You no longer fear suffering, you seek its meaning. You no longer resist the AQ, decode the pattern. And in this decoding, you claim your power, not through force, but through presence. Not by changing the outer world, but by illuminating the inner one. Everything that hurts you is trying to show you something. Everything that breaks you is trying to open you. Everything that unsettles you is trying to move you into alignment. Do not ask to be free from pain. Ask instead to understand its purpose. For once you understand, you will find that pain was never your enemy. It was your teacher, your revealer, your silent guide back to the throne of your imagination where all healing, all power, and all transformation begins. Asterisk pain to the unawakened man. appears to be an unfortunate byproduct of existence, an enemy to be avoided, an interruption to pleasure. But for the man who understands that consciousness is the only reality, pain becomes something entirely different. It becomes initiation. It becomes purification. It becomes proof that he is shedding the limitations of his former self. The discomfort is not an obstacle. It is the threshold. And to cross it is to walk directly into the temple of transformation when life presses upon you. When circumstances tighten their grip and the air of certainty becomes thin, that is the moment in which your internal structure is being tested, not by fate or punishment, but by your own inner movement, by the image you hold of yourself being brought to life. And if that image is too small, if it is built upon fear or weakness or avoidance, the world will not hesitate to show you its frailty. And this, the law, is merciful, for it reveals where you are still blind to your own power. It does not spare you from pain, because pain, rightly seen, is the exact agent that shapes kings from beggars and visionaries from victims. The idea that pain must be voided is a belief held only by those who believe they are flesh alone. But the one who knows himself to be imagination, who knows that the inner world determines the outer, embraces pain as part of the alchemical process. Like gold in the furnace, he remains still under heat, knowing that it is only through fire that purity is revealed. Not because the gold is impure by nature, but because the outer crust must be burned away. And so it is with identity. The pain you feel is the fire of transformation. The false must be consumed for the true to emerge. There is nothing accidental. In the arrangement of circumstances, what appears as resistance in your external world is but the residue of old imaginal acts, pressing against the emergence of your new self-concept. The deeper you move into awareness of your true nature, the more the unconscious fragments of who you were are pulled to the surface for release. This is why pain intensifies when you begin to awaken. It is not that things are getting worse, but that all that is false is being forced out of hiding. What was once tolerated can no longer remain. And so, the body may ache, the heart may tremble, the mind may resist, but something sacred is being born beneath it all. Pain is not to be feared, for it is not your enemy. It is the evidence that you are leaving the shallow waters of unconscious, living and entering the current of divine becoming. The moment you stop seeking to numb it and begin to ask, what in me is this showing? You shift the entire structure of your experience. You are no longer a victim of pain. You become the interpreter of it. And as you interpret, you transform. Now understand this clearly. The world will always reflect the relationship you have with yourself. There is no exception. What irritates you in others is a mirror of your own disowned qualities. What you hate, fear, or mock externally lives, in some measure, within you. And until you recognize this, until you stop projecting and start owning, you will continue to experience suffering, not because you are being punished, but because you are being shown. When you call someone arrogant, ask what part of you is afraid to be bold. When you accuse someone of being selfish, ask what part of you desires to honor your own needs, but feels guilty for doing so. When you resent someone's success, ask what part of you still doubts your ability to create. These questions are not about shame. They are about awakening. For the world outside is your reflection, not your judge. Every insult, every betrayal, every offense is an arrow pointing back to a wound within. And when you learn to trace these arrows, not with blame, but with wonder, you discover that nothing is against you. Everything is exposing you to yourself. The one who lives in true awareness does not react when he is offended. He reflects. He knows that what is surfaced in his outer world is revealing a concept of self that has long been operating in the shadows. And in this revelation, he finds opportunity. He sees the lesson. He thanks the mirror and begins his inner work. He knows that there is no liberation in blaming the mirror for the face it reflects. He must change the image within. It is not what happens to you that defines you, but how you respond to what happens. And your response is the clearest evidence of your current state of consciousness. When you feel pain and project it outward, you bind yourself to it. But when you bring the pain inward, when you ask what it is showing you about your beliefs, your assumptions, your suppressed emotions, you loosen the chain. You begin to move in power, not because the pain is gone, but because it no longer owns your narrative. The people who disturb your peace are not accidents. They are instruments of clarity. Their actions call forth your unconscious patterns, your buried resentments, your hidden insecurities. And in doing so, they become sacred teachers, not because they are noble, but because they are useful. They serve your awakening. They bring your attention to parts of you would never have seen on your own. Okay. And once you see it, once you recognize, the projection, the hold it had on you dissolves. There is no need to beg the world to treat you better. The world cannot behave differently than the state from which you observe it. So instead of seeking revenge, seek revision. Instead of demanding apology, dwell in understanding. See clearly the root of your pain. Find the belief beneath the offense. Change that belief, and the pattern vanishes, not because the outer has changed, but because the inner has shifted into alignment. Nothing you experience is neutral. Every irritation is feedback. Every disappointment is information. Every trigger is an open doorway into yourself. And the longer you avoid these doorways, the more the pain will press upon you, not out of cruelty, but out of love. For life itself is committed to your transformation, and it will not cease until you become that which you truly are. If you walk the path of awareness, you begin to welcome every disruption as an invitation. You are no longer shaken by chaos. You become the stillness in the storm, not because you suppress your reactions, but because you understand their origin. As you live in this state, pain loses its threat. It no longer chases you. It teaches you. You begin to see beauty where you once saw betrayal. The shadows that once haunted you become familiar. And in that familiarity, you reclaim power. Not power over others, but power over your attention, your assumptions, your imaginal acts. And so, when the fire of life comes in, you do not run. You recognize it. You sit in the flame, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you trust the process. You know that nothing real can be lost. Only the unreal can burn, and you allow it. Let the small self dissolve so the true self may emerge. This is the way. Not resistance, not escape, but awareness. Pure, unwavering awareness of what the pain is pointing to within you. And in that awareness, everything changes, because you no longer seek to change the world. You change the concept of self. In the world, being nothing more than self-expressed, follows. What a man calls suffering is nothing more than the announcement of his next transformation. But the world, in its sleep, misses the message. It turns its back on discomfort, calling it misfortune or injustice. The truth, however, is that pain is a sacred teacher, one of the highest standard only visits when a new state is available, but the old one is still being clung to. Every experience of pain is an opportunity, though it is rarely seen as such. In the moment, yet those who awaken to this principle find themselves in possession of a key that unlocks every locked door in life. To feel pain is to be shown where your awareness has been misdirected. For the outer world is not the cause, it is the result. The man who complains about circumstances fails to understand that the external is shaped entirely by what he inwardly consents to. When pain arises, it is asking a simple question. What? Do you still believe that no longer belongs to who you truly are? And if one would sit with that question, not resist it, not distract from it, not drown it with noise, he would hear the precise answer echoed in the silence of his own being. What is this teaching me? That is the question every man must ask when adversity visits. And the answer is always there, just beneath the surface of reaction. Perhaps it teaches that you have placed your worth in the hands of others. Perhaps it reveals that you have been assuming the worst of yourself, and life has merely brought that assumption into view. Or perhaps it is showing you a version of yourself you outgrew long ago but never let go of. In all cases, pain is never blind. It is exact. It is a spiritual scalpel, cutting only what no longer serves. To ask, what is this teaching me? Is to move from the role of victim to that of creator. For nothing is happening to you. It is happening through you. You have imagined something willingly or not tanned life. Being no respecter of persons has faithfully brought it into expression. There's no cruelty in this. Only law. And when that law is understood, pain becomes the means by which you gain dominion over your own reality. You do not fear its appearance. You welcome its guidance. Not because you wish to suffer, but because you know that within every pain lies a message. More valuable than gold, what appears as loss may be revealing your dependence on the outer for peace. What looks like betrayal may be uncovering a belief that you are unworthy of loyalty. What feels like delay may be the voice of your higher self refusing to let you enter a door too small for your destiny. And what the senses call failure may in truth be the crumbling of a foundation that could never have sustained the life you were born to live. To see through this lens is to interpret experience correctly. It is to read the symbols of your world with spiritual eyes. The external world is a moving picture of your inner assumptions. When the picture disturbs, you must revise the script, not the actors, not the setting. The words and beliefs playing silently beneath your breath. Pain simply brings attention to that which was previously unconscious. It is not introducing anything new. It is exposing what you already carry. And in that exposure, you are given the rare and divine opportunity to choose again, to assume again, to imagine again. There is no healing without discomfort. For healing requires a letting go, and the false self resists release. It clings. It rationalizes. It prefers the familiar pain to the unfamiliar truth. But when one becomes willing to feel what arises without resistance, to allow the discomfort to speak rather than be silenced, something extraordinary occurs. The pain loses its grip. The illusion dissolves. And the man who once believed himself broken realizes he was only asleep to his own authority. The transformation of pain is not a matter of endurance, but of attention. Where you place your attention determines what you magnify. When you place your attention not on the surface drama, but on the message beneath it, you shift from survival to mastery. You are no longer asking, why is this happening to me? But rather, who am I being that disappears in my world? This question pierces illusion. It cuts through the fog of reaction, and it positions you once again as the source of your experience. That now understand this. Suffering that is unconscious is merely repetition. The man who does not learn will relive. But suffering that is seen through the lens of awareness becomes transformation. It becomes alchemy. It becomes the fire through which the dross is burned away and only the gold of truth remains. This is the purpose of every pain you've ever felt, not to diminish you, but to awaken you. Not to punish, but to clarify. Not to destroy, but to shape. There's a moment in every life when one must decide whether he will continue to interpret his world by the evidence of the senses or by the vision of his inner knowing. Pain is the fork in that road. It demands a choice. It says, will you react as you always have, or will you look inward and rise to a new state? For the pain you feel is not bound to the past, it is bound to a current assumption. When the assumption is revised, the pain dissolves like mist at sunrise. When you enter the fire of experience with awareness, you do not emerge the same. You come out refined, with eyes that see through form and ears that hear the hidden invitation in every trial. You begin to notice that nothing is random, that even the smallest moment of discomfort contains a thread that, if followed, leads to a deeper unveiling of your true nature. And the man who walks this path, not once but daily, finds that the very things he once feared become his greatest allies. They become portals. They become proof of his becoming. There's nothing wasted in the life of the one who understands this. Every memory, every heartbreak, every anxious night becomes fuel for awakening. The moments that seem to break him become the exact moments that built him. Not in appearance, but in awareness. For the outer things pass away, but the man who has gained insight cannot return to blindness. He walks forward with quiet power, not because life has become easy, but because his perception has become true. This is the alchemy of suffering. To take what once seemed bitter and find it filled with the sweetness of revelation. To see that behind the event was a lesson, and behind the lesson was love. A love so precise, so intelligent, that it would dismantle every false identity just to reveal the one within. The man who accepts this path does not escape pain. He transcends it. And in doing so, he moves through life not as a servant of circumstance, but as a son of the unseen. What is this teaching me? What part of me is being revealed? These are not mere questions. I'll tell you, keys. They unlock the door between the outer world and the inner kingdom. And when that door is opened, the world must follow. For the outer is always the echo. The inner is always the voice. Pain is the echo of a belief no longer in harmony with your higher knowing. Listen to it. Learn from it. Revise the belief. Imagine anew. Let the fire consume only what was never real to begin with. What remains is you pure, awake, and whole. Asterisk, there is an unseen order beneath every event. Though to the outward eye, world appears chaotic, cruel, or unpredictable. What appears as coincidence or tragedy on the surface is governed from a deeper law. A divine logic, a perfect symmetry that remains hidden until man lifts his gaze from the world of appearances and looks inward. That inner gaze is not of the physical eyes, but of the imagination. It is the silent, observing faculty that can discern meaning where the senses see only disorder. To the man ruled by sight, life is a collection of random hardships and fleeting pleasures. But to the man ruled by vision, life is symbolic, precise, an order guided not by chance but by consciousness itself. The ancient principle remains unchanged. As within, so without. The structure of your world is determined by the structure of your assumptions. When you assume yourself to be unloved, life reveals isolation. When you assume danger, life produces anxiety and conflict. But these are not punishments. They are reflections. They are not the voice of faith. They are the echo of what you have whispered to yourself in silence. To change the echo, one must change the voice. To see new outcomes, one must revise the self that calls them forth. And yet, even when one becomes aware of this truth, pain still arises. But now, it serves a different function. Pain no longer arrives as a blow from outside, but as the call of the inner being. It is the friction between the old assumption and the new identity seeking to be born. It is the tremble of a man who has outgrown his past, yet still clings to its habits and fears. The pain itself is not random. It is placed with precision. It visits the exact areas of consciousness that require surrender, clarity, and elevation. Each discomfort is shaped perfectly to reveal the lie you've accepted as truth. It presses against the boundary of who you were, so that you may finally step into who you truly are. This is the logos of divine intelligence that arranges all things with spiritual order. When you begin to recognize this order, you cease asking why bad things happen and begin asking what assumptions gave them form. You no longer blame the world. You interpret it. The outer world is a book, and pain is one of its most honest paragraphs. You are not its victim. You are its author. When a storm appears, it is not the sky punishing. It is the sky expressing. The inner conflict you have yet to resolve. When love disappears, it is not abandonment. It is the withdrawal of reflections that no longer serve the story your soul is now ready to live. Pain is not a sign that you are cursed. It is a sign that you are evolving. And evolution begins with the breakdown of the unreal. That breakdown can feel like chaos because it touches the parts of your identity that you have made sacred. But those sacred things were never true. They were only accepted. Whereas being accepted can be revised. The Logos demands revision, not in the outer world, but in the inner image. The moment you revise who you are, the world must obey. It has no will of its own. It cannot rebel against the state from which it draws. It's life. This order is not cold or mechanical. It is alive. It is benevolent. It is the exact force that allows you to fall so that you may rise stronger. It is the one that removes the people, the jobs, the circumstances that you secretly prayed to be free from, though your conscious mind did not yet have the courage to admit it. It is the pattern of correction written into the fabric of your experience, not to punish you, but to perfect you. You cannot hide from it. You can only align with it. To align is not to strive, but to surrender. Not to beg, but to assume. Not to fix the world, but to see it rightly. Pain is often the sign that the world is trying to correct your sight. It reveals that you have been looking outward for peace, control, validation. But the outer world was never designed to give you those things. It was only ever designed to mirror them. And when you remember this, you stop chasing shadows and begin shaping substance. There is nothing accidental in what appears before you. The exact timing, the precise characters, the emotional weight of every encounter, all of it flows from the assumptions you carry in secret. And when the outer world begins to crack, it is not falling apart. It is falling into place. The old structure must dissolve before the new one can appear. This dissolution may look like crisis, but it is the signature of rebirth. The man who embraces this order begins to see beauty even in his breakdown. He finds rhythm in silence. He finds clarity in confusion. He walks not with fear, but with reverence, knowing that every moment is meaningful, every event divinely calculated to reflect and evolve the content of his inner world. He no longer asks to be spared from pain. He asks to understand it. Right? In that understanding, pain loses its power to torment. It becomes a teacher. It becomes a map. It becomes an indicator that his consciousness is shifting. You are not broken. You are becoming. Pain is not a signal of failure. It is the pressure required for transformation. The seed must crack before it becomes a tree. The caterpillar must dissolve before it becomes the butterfly. The old self must ache before the new self can breathe. This process is not optional. It is the path of awakening. Those who resist it extend their suffering. They fight the fire meant to burn away what no longer belongs. They cling to the familiar because it is known, not because it is true. But familiarity is not freedom. Only truth is freedom. And truth often arrives as pain before it reveals itself as peace. The man who understands this lives differently. Walks through difficulty with eyes open, listening. He asks himself, what is this experience pulling from me? What belief have I outgrown that is now being exposed? What new self is forming behind the veil of this disruption? Has no words, no certainty. He remains faithful to the unseen order. He trusts the silence. He remains in the state of knowing that nothing real can be lost and nothing false can be kept. He knows that pain sharpens his perception, breaks down his illusions, and brings him face to face with the image he has unknowingly projected onto the screen of the world. And once he sees it, he has the choice to revise it. Not later, not when it is convenient, but now, in this moment. For the moment you awaken to the false, you have the authority to assume the true. You are always assuming. You are always imagining. The only question is whether you are doing it knowingly or unknowingly. Pain enters to make you conscious. snap you out of passive dreaming and invite you into deliberate creation. It is not the enemy. It is a hand on your shoulder saying, wake up, look again, choose again. And the moment you do, the scenery must shift. The people must change. The story must evolve. Not because you forced it, but because you finally remembered who the author was. And so, when the ache comes, when the confusion grows, when everything you once depended on begins to shake, do not run. Do not panic. Do not retreat. Instead, listen. For something sacred is being rearranged, not by luck, not by fate, but by the law of consciousness, always seeking to reveal more of what you truly are. Not broken, not lost, not punished, but becoming.